Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, wherever you are. This is FPL Under the Radar 2023-24 preseason. This is our second preseason video this year, and this is a special one. We have two very special guests from FPL USA with us today, Alex and Yogesh. How are you guys doing, Alex?
I'm doing great. Thank you guys so much for having me. It's great to see your guys' faces
Yeah,
in person finally after interacting for so long.
no, absolutely, absolutely. You want to quickly introduce yourself, what you do, and how you started playing FPL in general?
Yeah, so I'm best known on Twitter for my Man City predictions, sort of trying to predict Pep Roulette and doing starting odds for that as well. Along with that, I think threads are probably the thing that I'm best known for. I do a variety of FPL threads, tactical threads, primarily based on City, but also sometimes about other teams and about FPL in general. And I got into FPL, I think 5 seasons ago now. I started playing the draft mode with some friends
Hmm.
from high school here in the US. And just over time, it became a sort of addiction for me, and to the point where I'm now creating content every day on Twitter. So,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
No. Yeah, absolutely enjoy your content, great content, especially Man City team prediction. It's a tough job, right? Predicting Pep Roulette. But I think you
Yeah.
did great last season. It was a tough season, specifically, middle of the season when Pep changed the formation and so on. Rico Luis coming into the team and things like those, right? So always hard to do that, but absolutely appreciate all the effort that you put in. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you
And
guys.
we also have Yogesh with us. This is your second time in FPL Radar. Yogesh, you were here with us to preview Arsenal last season as well. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, guys. Elite company today. Three folks finished in top 10K this season. Is there any other show that can boast of that? ZD finished in three-digit ranks. That's amazing. So it's a pleasure to be here back this year. And yeah, looking forward to the discussion for Manchester City and Arsenal, and especially looking forward to hear from Alex on City. Hopefully, we can predict some things, and because right, with City, if you predict, you can hit jackpot. So yeah, looking
Absolutely.
forward to all the discussion.
Yeah, good to have you, Yogesh. And as I always say, you have been my kind of go-to guy for any Arsenal team idea in general, like what the formation is going to be, who is nailed and not. And of course, it's always difficult to tell, but you have always been very useful with anything Arsenal over the last couple of years. We are always connected via the FPL USA group chat as well. So feels like we always talk
Yeah,
anyways. But
exactly.
yeah, absolutely great to have you here with us today.
Thank you.
So, yep. Wrangler and ZD, how are you guys doing?
I'm doing great. Very much excited and looking forward to this episode of this preseason video because we have two special guests. As you said, right? We are they're kind of our like few of the go-tos,
Mhm.
with respect to their teams. So very much looking forward to it. And thank you guys for joining us.
A pleasure.
ZD,
Yeah,
how
same
about
here.
you?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Thank you, Alex, and thank you guys for joining. Great to have you guys in the shows. Very excited to chat with you guys about Man City and Arsenal. I guess this year Arsenal will be tough because of lots of new signing. So the prediction should not be could be difficult, right? Because you have
Yeah.
uh,
Bigger
like
squad. Yeah,
yeah, bigger squad, and obviously Man City is always tough. So Alex, very eager to hear from you guys.
yep, absolutely, absolutely. All right, so let's go into this. And of course, the two best teams in the league last season very much expect to continue that. Both of the teams to perform at the same level this year as well. Uh, but of course, the players moving in and moving out in the transfer season, it may change a few things here and there. So we'll just start with the transfer season in general. What you guys think about your transfer season so far, and what you expect in the next month or so until at least the transfer season ends. So we'll start with you, Alex. How are you seeing Man City's transfer season so far? ins and outs and what you expect?
Yeah, so obviously it's sort of a transition season in a way, even after winning a treble for City, because you have these, you look at the transfer outs there, and it's all these veteran names who have been with City for 4, 5, 6 seasons, and they win a treble, and it's sort of the pinnacle that they can reach at City, so it makes sense for them to move on. And in that sense, it's a really difficult sort of bridge to build for City, because you're losing a lot of these sort of big personalities and big profiles, and not necessarily on the pitch, but also off the pitch. It's a lot of leaders as well. So, we lost Gundogan to Barcelona, and we've already replaced him with Mateo Kovacic. To me, I read that as, I think sort of on the intangible side of things, in terms of what Kovacic brings as a person and as a presence within the City squad. It's very much a sort of like-for-like replacement for Gundogan, as much as you can get on the transfer market. They're a similar age. They both have a wealth of experience. They're both sort of soft-spoken leaders. They both have a lot of worldly qualities about them. I know Kovacic speaks 5 languages, including Spanish, so I know Pep's happy about that. And on the pitch, it's a bit different, because, Gundogan is this uber flexible player who is able to, be this box crashing presence for City at times, and then at other times he was able to sit in as a lone 6. So Gundogan could sort of do it all, and Kovacic simply doesn't have that about his game. He's more of this deep-lying facilitator, and in the 2 preseason games, the sort of glimpses we've got at him so far, it's very clear that that's the case. And maybe Pep will develop him over time, but that's something that we'll have to talk about. And then alongside that, we have Riyad Mahrez leaving in attack. And that's also the other confirmed departure at this point. That's a very difficult one for City, because he offered such a unique presence in terms of the high volume of output he was able to produce with sort of such low minutes relatively. He was never a player who played more than 2,000 or so Premier League minutes, but he was always in that sort of upper echelon for output, especially per 90. And when you look at the landscape of the transfer market, there are very, very few profiles to replace that. And Rafinha, as is listed there, is my favorite replacement for him, because he just sort of ticks all the boxes that I look for in that case. I know a lot of people are excited about Michael Elise being a potential replacement, but I look at City's squad, and we have a 22-year-old Cole Palmer, we have a 20-year-old Oscar Bob, and I just question whether it's worth bringing, a 21-year-old in when you could argue that all 3 of those players have a similar potential. So that's my perspective on that, and it's definitely one to unpack and is a bit difficult to read at this point. And then lastly, Josko Gvardiol is likely coming in. It's taking a very long time as they work through the details, but he is going to be an absolutely immense addition if and when he comes to City in the left side of defense. We saw today that Nathan Ake was forced to go off, and it just shows that we don't really have another left-footed option on that side. So, Aymeric Laporte was sort of pushed out thanks to him not having the sort of physical qualities, the pure defender qualities that Pep was looking for. But I think Gvardiol is going to be an absolutely exceptional addition once he joins. And then just to quickly mention, Kyle Walker, it's sort of in the balance right now. That'll be sorted in the next few days, I assume. Bernardo Silva, I expect to stay. Aymeric Laporte and Joao Cancelo, I expect to leave.
Okay. Do you see in general, with all these changes and everything, City and Pep to kind of continue that, what can I call it, like a 3-2-2-3 in attack formation? Will that be a feature this season as well?
I think that will certainly be the primary system, but I think the signing of Kovacic points to a slight change or tweak in that at some points. And what that is a shifting to more of a 3-4-3 diamond, where in that 4-man midfield, instead of a box where you have 2 DMs and 2 attacking mids, you have more so a line of 3 and then a free number 10 in front of them. So we saw this in the first half in the game against Yokohama in the first preseason friendly. And I know it's on the coming slide, so I'll talk about it more in detail when we get there. But pretty much Kovacic was sitting sort of level with John Stones on the right, and Rodri was dropping in between them. And so it's a very, very slight tweak. It's very, very similar in terms of the buildup, but it's a slight tweak. And for a player like Phil Foden, who may be occupying that free number 10 role, it kind of have some interesting ramifications there.
Interesting. All right, great insight, Alex. Let's move on to Arsenal. Same discussion, Yogesh. Some great inclusions. Of course, I'm pretty sure you're excited.
Yeah.
How are you in general seeing Arsenal's transfer season so far?
Yeah, very exciting to be honest. I mean, as an Arsenal fan, I don't remember us being this proactive in the market and address all the major pain points from last season so quickly. So it has definitely got us all the fans very excited for the upcoming season. So looking at the ins, right, you got in Declan Rice, Julian Timber, and Kai Havertz, right? And if you look at some of the major pain points for Arsenal, I mean, particularly at the end of the season, I think we fell off dramatically because of issues in the central midfield. Thomas Partey was pretty much world class for the first half of the season, but then slowly, there were issues with his form dipping, and also once William Saliba got injured, right? Yeah, I mean, the drop in quality was huge, right? With Rob Holding taking his place. So you can quickly see that, right? Arteta has added some depth to those positions and players who are versatile who can play in multiple positions like Timber, for example. He can fill in right back. He can play as a inverted fullback in the central midfield. He can also play center back. Havertz, he can play across all the attacking positions. Declan Rice is capable of playing as an 8, as a 6. So I mean, is looking at the profile of players who can address multiple positions, and I think with these three coming in, it has definitely added quality to Arsenal in terms of squad depth as well. So yeah, very exciting. I mean, we have to be also mindful that all these three guys are new and they are gonna play a major role in the first team. So it's gonna take some time for them to adapt to play with each other together. I'm looking at these three in particular, and I envision them to play in the central midfield, like typically the same formation City play in a box midfield, right? So if you look at that, if Timber inverts into the midfield, you have Rice and Timber and Havertz, right? Three new guys playing in that central midfield area. So
Mhm.
we have to temper our expectations initially. When you compare with City, those guys had Gundogan, Rodri, De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva. Those guys have been playing together for years, and you can see the magic that they do in the center of the pitch, right? Arsenal are trying to get there. And they have got the players who can achieve that level, but it's going to take some time, at least initially, for them to gel together as a team. So yeah, I'm really excited, and also the age profiles of these signings, right? I mean, you look across the squad; it's all like 24-year-old, 25-year-old with plenty of Premier League experience as well. In most cases, yeah, it's everybody's gonna grow together, and people forget that, like, you see that gradual improvement with Arsenal, like over the past 3 seasons, right? They finished with 61 points, then they moved to 69, now they finished with 84 points. So there is a gradual progression there. Players like Saka, Martinelli, you can count on them to gradually improve or incrementally improve the overall quality of the team as well. So yeah, with these new additions as well, I'm really looking forward to it. In terms of transfer out, yeah, Granit Xhaka has been a major exclusion for us. He has been I mean, he has played literally every single game under 4 different managers for Arsenal. So obviously, all these managers rate him highly, and he has been asked to fill the creative left eight role for Arsenal last season, which is typically not his preferred position, right? So you can see that Arteta is looking to go towards a formation where he wants to play with two creative eights, and play a box midfield with a defensive midfielder and an inverted fullback. That's definitely his vision, and that's why he probably asked Xhaka to play that role for the entirety of last season. And that probably also gives a good indication of why he was keen on getting Havertz to Arsenal, right? So yeah, Xhaka is going to be a loss, big experience, but then you are replacing him with a captain leader, Declan Rice. So I think we should be fine. He's a midfield engine. He can cover a lot of ground in the midfield, and he can keep the ball ticking. So it looks good. In terms of other tentative transfers out, Kieran Tierney, I'm not so sure right now. I know there were interest from Newcastle and Aston Villa earlier this window, but I think he offers a lot of tactical flexibility for Arsenal, right? I mean, especially if you think about playing Timber as an inverted right back, full back. I think Tierney would be a good option as a left center back, specifically when you are playing with the ball, right? In position, he could be a good left center back with Gabriel and Saliba. So I think there is a lot of, I think he's going to get a lot of more minutes compared to last season. And Thomas Partey, I don't think he's leaving Arsenal. If I mean, there are a lot of speculations and rumors around Saudi clubs interested in him. But I think one, it would take a lot of money for him to go out, and then I don't think we would have enough time to replace him because you can't just let him go without finding an appropriate replacement. So, I mean, if I have to bet, I am inclined to saying that Thomas Partey is going to stay at Arsenal. Balogun is definitely on the cards for exit. I think there's a lot of interest from Italian clubs, specifically Inter Milan for Balogun. So I think if we get a decent enough fee around 30-40 million pounds, I think he'll be on his way out from Arsenal. Yeah, but overall, I'm really looking forward to it. I think Arsenal would also probably include one more attacking option, probably later down the window, once they are able to sell off some of the players. At this point of time, they are content with where we are, but don't rule out any couple of more signings once we get to the end of the window, because the opportunities might open up. You never know that what happens, like with the likes of Kylian Mbappe, if he moves to Real Madrid, right, that can create a lot of openings. People who are not even expected to move will all of a sudden be available in the market, because Real Madrid need to fund that kind of transfer, Mbappe kind of transfer. So people like Chouameni or somebody else, like they might be open with. I mean, so it's going to be an opportunistic market towards the end of the window. So we really don't know what's going to happen, but it's all exciting, and we look good going into the season.
Yeah, I think there has been some rumors about Kudus as well, right?
Kudus, yeah. He's another versatile player. I mean, and he's also again under 24, 23. That's typically what Arida and Edu has been transferring the market. Huge potential. I mean, it's not only potential, but they are also kind of proven talents, and they are extremely versatile. They can play across multiple positions. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Great insights, Yogesh. Thanks for taking us through that, and hoping that all the transfers will work out great for both of you, for Man City and Arsenal. So moving on, we'll talk about the preseason a little bit. Of course, preseason is still ongoing. Man City has played 2 games. Arsenal has played 3 games. I think Arsenal plays Barcelona tomorrow or tonight, I think, kind of, our time. And there are more games coming as well. So first of all, we'll start with Man City. Alex, what do you think so far of these 2 games? I saw your threads, of course, on Twitter, very detailed threads. If anyone doesn't follow Alex yet, absolutely do. Great insight on Man City and in general on FPL. But yeah, take us through what you think so far about the Man City games.
Appreciate it. Yeah, so Pep pretty much approached both preseason games by throwing out 2 completely different 11s in both halves of both games. So in the first game, he started with what you see on the left, and then at halftime, he took off all 10 outfielders and replaced them with 10 entirely new outfielders, and then Maximo Perón was subbed in with about 15 minutes left. So Pep's pretty much just, getting minutes into people's legs and putting players in the roles that I think he would like to see them in generally, sort of prioritizing with the most important players, and then players who are on the fringe, sort of like Cancelo, just fill in wherever is sort of left over. And, in the first game against Yokohama, the thing that I was most interested to see is the thing that I mentioned earlier about this sort of diamond midfield. And pretty much what happened is in the first half, our structure was very experimental in some ways. where over the course of that 45 minutes, it was sort of constantly evolving, and players for about like a 15-minute portion of time would occupy one sort of role, and then it would sort of change for the next 15 minutes. And the thing that I was talking about is pretty much what was happening is, John Stones was pushing up in possession as he normally does. But instead of Mateo Kovacic pushing up as well, Kovacic sort of stayed in a deeper lying midfield role. And what that resulted in possession was a back three of Ake, Akanji, Walker, and then a midfield three in front of them of Kovacic, Phillips, and Stones. And then in front of them were these four attackers who were sort of dropping in and out, and especially Alvarez and McAtee were sort of constantly interchanging. So I thought that experimentation was interesting, and it sort of confirmed my ideas about Kovacic playing this deeper lying role and allowing Pep to utilize a 3-4-3 diamond a bit more this season, because we saw that at some crucial times at the end of last season. Aside from that, the sort of standout performers in that first game were John Stones from the inverted role and Rico Lewis, who was playing the same role in the second half. I think it's hard for any player who's playing that role well to not sort of be at the center of attention, because everything just goes through them. And then aside from that, the other player who stuck out is a player who is very, very sort of highly sought after in the FPL landscape right now, which is Phil Foden. And in the second half, what we saw is Phil Foden occupying the Gundogan role from the left attacking midfield spot. And crucially, I think a lot of people, sort of dismiss the importance of preseason right away. And of course, there's a lot of information that you can just sort of allow to go in one ear and out the other. But something that was crucial for me is in both preseason games so far, Foden has played the left attacking mid role, and Sergio Gomez has played left wing at the same time. And Sergio Gomez is a player who can very, very easily play that left attacking mid role as well. So Pep had the option to sort of swap those two either way he'd liked, and he put Foden in midfield instead of on the wing. And to me, that's a very, very resounding decision as to where Pep is trying to integrate Foden this season. That's the sort of main thing that came out of that first friendly for me. Foden had some very bright moments in the second half. There were 3 or 4 moves between him and Haaland, where Haaland was making these sort of right to left diagonal runs, and Foden was feeding him through that channel. One of them resulted in Haaland's first goal of the game, and it just was a very great early sign for Foden's prospects in that attacking midfield role. The friendly today was sort of a bit less entertaining in some ways. I didn't get as much out of it as the first friendly. Bayern put out a very strong lineup in the first half. We put out a little bit weaker of a lineup. I think our second half lineup was a bit stronger. So the first half was very back and forth. It was the same role that the same system that we're used to seeing, but the sort of main point here was Kovacic was playing the Rodri role, and he played that exceptionally well. He didn't stand out, but any player who's playing that sort of deep lying 6 role, they shouldn't stand out. They should be just someone who's facilitating the play, and Kovacic did that exceptionally. And then another sort of standout performer was Rico Lewis playing from the right attacking mid position. He created City's first goal of the game. He had so many amazing sort of patterns of play. And, that's something to look out for, because we think of Kevin De Bruyne occupying that main spot. We know he's injured for the time being, coming back soon. And we generally think of Julian Alvarez as the sort of primary deputy in that position. But what Rico Lewis showed today, I get that it's a preseason friendly, but it was pretty much a Bayern's, set of first choice players. He played incredibly well. And when we sort of think about a balance between those two attacking midfielders, and we think about Foden, this more attacking player, potentially playing on the left, Rico Lewis could potentially provide a really nice balance for Pep coming on that right attacking midfield role in place of someone like De Bruyne or Alvarez. And, aside from that, I don't really have that much to point out from this friendly. It was sort of typical City. Players were occupying their typical positions. Oscar Ball played really well off the right wing, which is an important note in the second half, but otherwise not much stood out to me.
All right, good insights again. Other than KDB, everyone is at least fit and available right now, right? And no other injuries.
Yeah,
Well,
and KDB is back in training. Yeah, he's back in training.
Ake got injured probably. Do you know what happened to Ake, though? Is it something serious or no?
It looked like a calf injury, and then he kept playing for a minute or two, and then he walked off on his own accord. It just seemed like production. So, I mean, we'll look out for any news that comes. We have another friendly on July 30th against Atletico Madrid, so I'm sure that Pep will give us an update by then. But it looked to just be a precaution and a little knock.
Yeah, if Gavardiol transfer does happen, does that make Ake almost like a non-option for FPL in general, or you think it still could be viable?
I think so. Yeah, I just expect Guardiola to, become the first choice option there in the long term because his attacking ability is so much better than Ake's. Ake was exceptional for us, and when you're looking for more of this pure defender, I think he'll be a better tactical option for Pep. And maybe it will take some time for Guardiola to bed into the team. So going with Ake in the beginning of the season is not completely off, but yes, I generally think that if Guardiola is to be added, it's a hard avoid.
Perfect. All right.
Follow up on that question from Kake, right, Alex? So the preferred back four, would you say it's like Guardiola, John Stones, Diaz, and Akanji? Like, I mean, if you have to start the best back four.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can say for the time being, Ake and Guardiola 50-50 at that left back role, but the other three are pretty much set in stone, yeah.
Got it. Okay.
All right, great. Yogesh, moving on to you. Arsenal have already played 3 games. The last game was probably not something that you're looking forward to, but what do you think in general of Arsenal, how they're shaping up in the preseason?
Yeah, like pretty much like what Alex mentioned, right? Like Arteta is trying to get in players back to their fitness levels, right? That he expects them to be before the start of the season. So we see a lot of players playing different roles. Few key surprises, if I may point out, like in the second game against the MLS All-Stars, right? Leandro Trossard played as a left 8 because I didn't see him play that role before, and he was really lively and really good in that match. So that's something to look forward to. Like Trossard is a good ball carrier, and if Arteta is gonna eventually set up his team in a way with 2 creative 8s, he could become a very good left-sided 8 option for Arsenal. In addition to Havertz. So. We also saw Nketiah playing the left forward role, typically where Martinelli plays. So that could be an option for him in addition to the central striker role. So those are some of the things that I observed. Like talking about the Arsenal-Man United game, right? I think United were really good in that match, but 2 individual errors from Arsenal, Aaron Ramsdale and Gabriel Magalhaes, considering injury, considering major errors leading to the goals. I think overall we were okay. The passing was not that quick. That I kind of attribute that to the artificial turf in that match. You didn't see the normal fizz in the passes that you would see in that game, and the build up was slow. And Arsenal were not that great in that match, but they were okay overall. We also got to see for the first time Declan Rice, Kai Havertz, Timber, and Martin Odegaard playing in that box midfield. That is something we definitely want to look forward to. It looks like I mean, if I have to predict, I think Arteta would play with 2 really attacking creative 8s at home games or easier games. Wherein you can see Havertz and Odegaard playing together, or even Trossard and Odegaard playing. However, if it's going to be against the top 6 opposition, or it's going to be a tough away game, I really see Thomas Partey coming in central midfield with Declan Rice operating as a number 8 for those difficult games, at least initially. At least until these guys get into a proper rhythm, similar to how Manchester City operate. So, those are really some of the key insights. I mean, you have the other usual suspects playing in their usual roles: Martin Odegaard, Bukayo Saka, Martinelli, all great options at the start of the season. And like I don't see a reason why you wouldn't go for a triple Arsenal, at least at the start of the season. We can discuss that into more details, but yeah, it's it's pretty straightforward when it comes to Arsenal as of now, and the introduction of Timber obviously gives the likes of Zinchenko a break, because last season he was probably the only solid option for playing that inverted fullback role option in the central midfield. But with Timber, we now have flexibility to rest Zinchenko in few games and play the other way around with Timber coming in into the central midfield. So yeah, a lot of interesting options, a lot of tactical flexibility, especially in the defense, which we previously didn't have. And yeah, and like what we discussed earlier, right? I mean, you don't be surprised if you see like the players who were previously nailed down in the last season all of a sudden go missing in every games now and then, especially with Champions League coming into picture, right? There's a lot of options, attacking options, defensive options. So yeah, you might see rotation more often with Arsenal this season versus how it was last season. So something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Not good news for us FPL managers, but yeah, I think it was important for Arteta to grow his squad, especially with UCL this year. But yeah, great bicep. And I think Arteta kind of values those kind of versatile players, as you said, right? Players who can play multiple positions. Whether or not he uses them in multiple positions is a different thing, but at least he has the flexibility when needed. He can use them in different positions. So
Absolutely.
that's
Yeah.
great. All right. So
And
thanks.
so,
Yeah,
I
go
want to
ahead.
ask Yogesh the same question he asked me. So, what do you think is the preferred back four for you guys? And I have this idea that I think, at least how I sort of perceive it, it's a bit difficult for your four best defenders to get into the same back line. So, I want to hear your opinion on it.
Yeah, I mean, I want to answer that in two parts. Like, I mean, it depends on the opposition that we are playing and whether or not it's an home game versus an away game, because that changes a lot of things in my view. So let's say if it's an easy home game Arsenal are playing, I would definitely see Zinchenko starting in the lineup, because the control that he provides in the central midfield is like second to none. He's almost like a creative midfielder playing in the central midfield, and him and Partey, like last season, they literally I mean, gave no chance to the opposition, right? I mean, you saw Arsenal dominating games at home, winning comfortably, mainly because of the control Zinchenko offered in that central midfield position. So, if it's an easy home game or a straightforward home game, I would see Ben White starting right back, William Saliba right centre back, Gabriel Magalhaes left centre back, and Zinchenko left back. Now, if there are some tricky oppositions and tricky away games, I could see Zinchenko being left out and Kieran Tierney taking his place and Timber coming in for White, because then Timber offers that inverted fullback role that he can play when we are building out from the back, right? So yeah, that so in position you would see a Saliba right center back, Gabriel as a sweeper, and Kieran Tierney who can play left center back. I think he's very solid there, solid option as a left center back. And Timber and Rice, of what I saw in those preseason games, limited minutes, they are so comfortable on the ball. I think yeah, they will fit well there in the central midfield role. Yeah, but that's gonna be what I see. There are other tactical ways he can play. Kivior can come in for Gabriel Magalhaes. However, I don't see that happening too often in Premier League games. I rate Gabriel a lot, although he's prone to those errors every now and then. But as a left centre back, he's a very solid option. He also offers aerial threat while in the attacking set plays. So Saliba and Gabriel are pretty much nailed down for me. And with Gabriel at 5 million, right, he's a very enticing option to start the season with. The way they have priced Ben White, it's like they have basically ruled him out as an option. And with the introduction of Timber as well, I mean, there is no certainty on the 6 minutes anymore. But yeah, that's how I see it. Alex, I don't know if I answered that question.
Yeah, no, you did. And then the sort of curiosity that I have is that, I see your four best defenders. Obviously, the context depends, but generally, as Gabriel, Saliba, White, and I put Timber as the fourth guy in my opinion. I think, I see him as an absolutely exceptional player. Maybe it'll take him some time to bed in, but my sort of question with that is, in possession, it works perfectly because you have a back three of Gabriel, Saliba, Ben White, and then you have Timber inverting in front of them. But out of possession, if you drop Timber back to right center back or right back, it pushes Gabriel out to left back out of possession.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that suits his, he's much better as that left center back. So that's the worry that I have for you guys. And I'm just curious how Arteta's going to manage that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more there. I mean, even watching Gabriel, right, I'm not comfortable with him pushing out wide in the left back kind of a role. I mean, he's good as a left center back or maybe even as a sweeper. And that's why, I mean, I don't see all four of them starting in most of the games, the four guys that you mentioned, White, Timber, Saliba, and Gabriel. So if Arsenal want to play Timber as in that inverted fullback role, I think it's going to be either Tierney or Tomiyasu comes into the starting lineup so that Gabriel still plays in the central position versus shifting out wide. So that's how I see
That
it.
makes sense.
Yeah,
I got you.
Great discussion, Yogesh. Thanks for that. So before we jump on into the FPL assets and the players more specifically, let's quickly take a look at the fixtures. And I mean, there's no denying, I mean, of course, two best teams fixtures probably don't even matter much for them. But even so, the fixtures on paper look really, really lucrative for both the teams to start with. Man City has Burnley, Sheffield, Fulham, West Ham, Forest, Wolves until game week 7. Arsenal have Forest, Palace, Fulham, Everton, Bournemouth. And even the two tougher games are home games against Man United and Tottenham, right? So at least until game week 7, and by game week 8 and 9, a lot of us will be wildcarding probably anyway. So most of us are looking at a game week period when we are picking our teams in game week 1. So what do you guys think in general? Maybe start with Yogesh this time around. You already mentioned that like 3 Arsenal is kind of essential. There is no way, most people would start with 3. So what do you think in general? Like, do you see it any other way, or in general, like there's a lot of discussion about 3 attackers versus 2 attackers, 1 defender, and so on. Just looking at the fixtures in general, what do you think is the better strategy to pick the Arsenal assets?
Yeah, that's a great question, Avi. I think that's a question that's in everybody's minds right now. I'm just looking at those fixtures, right? And compare it with what happened last season, right? Everton away was a freak match. Sam Allardyce's first game last season, which we lost, but otherwise we pretty much won all the games there. All the home games: Fulham, Man United home, Tottenham home, Nottingham Forest home, Crystal Palace away, Bournemouth away. So all those 7 games were wins, right? And if you go back all the way till game week 10, even Chelsea away was a win. Sheffield is a newly promoted side at home, so it's going to be an easy game. The fixtures are like, you can't get a better fixture list to start the season for Arsenal. And if I look at it, I think 2 viable strategies are either play 3 Arsenal attackers or play 2 Arsenal attackers and an Arsenal defender. I think Arsenal considered around 44 goals last season, and with the introduction of players like Timber, Rice, I expect the defense to solidify a little bit, and I think Arsenal is a good bet for more clean sheets than last season. I think Rice will offer a lot, and especially in tough away games, right? You can still field an Arsenal defender because you can see Rice and Partey playing in the central midfield rather than playing 2 creative attacking 8s, right? In those games. So Arsenal are a good bang for a clean sheet in pretty much all the games. That's why an option like Gabriel is really good because he's priced at 5 million, playing for a top 2 side in the Premier League with a great start out to the season, right? Fixture list. I mean, it's a very good strategy to play him because then you are not filling up 3 attacking positions with Arsenal players single team, and then you can go across the other teams and get some good players from there too, right? Because if you go with Jesus, Martinelli, and Saka, right, you are already filling up close to 50% of the attacking positions that you will play for FPL, right? So Gabriel is a great option. Saliba is priced at 5.5. I don't see a reason why you want to go to him for an extra 0.5 million, at least at the start of the season when Gabriel is going to be nailed down, right? So
is Saliba 5.5? I thought he was 5.2, right? I might be wrong.
What is that, Saliba?
Saliba is 5.
I thought Saliba was 5.2. Yeah. But anyways, I think when you're picking one, it's probably leaning towards Gabriel more than Saliba. Anyways.
Yeah, I think he offers that extra bit of threat on set pieces, right, Gabriel? There's always a chance that he might score a header, and therefore, he's a kind of a better option than Saliba. Talking about the other options in Arsenal defense, you have Zinchenko. I mean, it's a great player, but I don't think he's gonna, start pretty much all the PL games, especially when Champions League comes into the picture, right? And with the other option, Timber and White and other players. So, I mean, looking at the defense, it's either Saliba or Gabriel. I don't see a reason why you would go for Ramsdale when you have these two options at center back. So, yeah, it narrows down to those two in the defensive position, and for attack, those are the 3. I mean, 3-4 players like you would want to target, like Gabriel Jesus, Saka, Martinelli, and Odegaard, right? So we'll talk a bit more about
the players in
defense. Yeah, but in terms of fixtures, I think it's these fixtures are great for attack. Look at those home games, right? Forest home, Fulham home. Even United and Tottenham home. I mean, Arsenal scored 3 goals or more on those games last season. So it's a great start for Arsenal attack. Yeah, that's how I see it. Initial fixtures. And to your point, Avi, right? Like you mentioned, like game week 8, typically most of the managers would anyways wild card. So I really don't see a reason for us to look beyond the first 7 games. And yeah, just go with it. Don't try to be very different with Arsenal attack. There are other places in the FPL where you can try to do something different. But when you know that these options are nailed on, just go with them. And yeah, and I don't hate the other option where you can go for 2 attackers and one defensive option from Arsenal. So
absolutely. Yeah, good points, Yogesh. Moving to you, Alex, and I mean, as I was saying before the video as well, I've seen you in Twitter talking about it. Good fixtures for Man City, absolutely, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to force yourself to pick 3 Man City players, because there are other more nailed players in the same price bracket and so on, right? So what do you think in general, like for Man City assets, or how you are envisioning it to start game week 1? With Man City players in general?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much the typical dilemma we get with City assets, where we have a really good schedule, and you know that even if a player starts, let's say you're aiming for an 8 game week period, if one player starts 6 out of those 8 games, they could still do well enough to match a different player who started 8 out of 8 games for their team. So it's all about balancing that risk. And I look at this fixture list. In terms of the attack, the game week 4 and game week 6 fixtures stick out to me the most, because we just know how lethal the City attack is at home. I think you look at the stats for last season and our attack at home, and especially you look at Haaland and his output at home, it's just very drastic between a home and away. As dominant as we are generally in sort of both. In terms of the defense, I look at teams like Burnley, who City beat 6-0 in the FA Cup this past January or February. I look at a team like Sheffield, Fulham, who are losing Mitrovic, replacing him with Raul Jimenez. Maybe it doesn't fill me with a lot of confidence. West Ham are a fine attack. Forest are so-so. Sometimes they have good games, sometimes they have bad games, and then Wolves are pretty toothless. So in defense, it looks really good, and in attack, it looks generally really good with a few very key fixtures. And what this all leads me back to is, okay, of course, everyone's going to have Haaland. It's a question of, do you have one city asset, 2 city assets, or 3 city assets, and who are those 2 and 3 players if you get them? And for me, given the rotation risks that we know, and Champions League starts, I believe, there's a first group stage game between game week 5 and game week 6, and another between 6 and 7. And so you look at 2 key fixtures there: Forest home, Wolves away, and you don't even know if your player is going to start that game because of UCL rotation. So for me, I think it's completely viable to start with Haaland and one other city asset, because you sort of have the you can manage that risk a bit better. You know that you have one player who is a minute's risk generally, but just because it's one player, it's sort of worth taking that risk on for the upside if you believe it's there. Once you get into the deeper waters of going for 2 city assets that are not Haaland, I just believe that the risk there is not necessarily justifiable, given, as you said, the wealth of options who are nailed for other teams elsewhere. So for me, as much as these fixtures are amazing on paper, I would be very wary of going with more than 2 or more than one non-Haaland asset, because I just think that you're sort of digging yourself a bit of a hole there, and opening up a can of worms where the sort of floor of your ceiling is reduced a bit because of the minutes and the potential rotation. Maybe the ceiling is a bit higher, but for me, at least for how I manage my risk within the game, it's not necessarily worth it. And to add one more thing to that, a part of the argument there is, okay, well, if I have a player like Manu Akanji and I hold him for the first 8 game weeks and he starts 6 games and he gets benched in 2, but he doesn't get subbed on in those 2, it's perfectly fine, because you pretty much have a Akanji plus another player. You always have a starting player. The issue is, Pep utilizes his subs, and he started doing this more and more last season. He utilizes his subs quite a bit, sometimes even before the 60th minute. So especially with the defenders, you might have a case where you have a defender who gets subbed on for 15 minutes, a defender who gets subbed off in the 55th minute. There's just so many possibilities there that I don't think it's worth taking that risk at this stage in the season.
Yeah, there's a great insight, Alex. So, I mean, if you have to settle down on the second asset, right, other than Haaland, right, who would be your preferred choice? Knowing everything that we know, like, I mean, Champions League starting around game week 5, game week 6. I mean, at least to hit, really target those first 4 game weeks, and probably move on from the second asset as we move to game week 5, game week 6.
In attack, it has to be Phil Foden, and we'll get into the details of why once we reach the later slides with a bit of the data. But just looking at the attackers that City have, there really isn't another sort of explosive option. We know that Jack Grealish just isn't an outstanding FPL asset. He doesn't really warrant a midfield spot when there are so many other attackers who are way better than him. Foden is that one guy who has that potential to be even more valuable than the likes of those other 7 to 8.5, 9 million midfielders. In attack, I think it has to be him. I'll explain more why later. I think Julian Alvarez is a bit of a trap, sort of, even though he is perhaps the best value attacking asset in the game when he does start. And then in defense, I think John Stones is probably the clear option. I think you get the potential attacking returns. He's had 2 really good shots, one which resulted in a goal so far in preseason. He's getting more and more into advanced areas, especially when Kovacic plays and can act as that counterweight on the opposite side. So he would certainly be my primary defensive pick, but I also wouldn't blame anyone for going with Ruben Diaz or Ederson, just because I think they are the most nailed in the defense. I think someone shared a stat on Twitter the other day. I'm trying to remember what exactly it was, but it was looking at Ruben Diaz the past few seasons, and he really is not someone that gets rotated early on in the season. So if you want someone who's very set for minutes in the outfield of City's defense, it's probably Ruben Diaz. John Stones is second below him with a bit more attacking impetus.
Right. Yeah, and to your point, I think it kind of makes sense, people who are opting to go for a defensive option like Stones, to couple that option with a decent fourth defensive option in your FPL bench, right? Somebody from Brentford or, those teams who have an off chance of keeping clean sheets every now and then in case John Stones doesn't start. And it looks like John Stones is probably an option who won't come in from a bench if he doesn't start. Like, is he one of those defenders, would you think, Alex? Like, if he starts, he starts. Otherwise, he's going to miss that match.
Generally, yeah. I think Ake and Akanji are generally the guys who get subbed in a bit more, and then Stones and Diaz are probably a bit safer when they're on the bench, but I still wouldn't put anything past Pep. I'll try to pull up the stats as to how many times Stones got subbed on last season, but yeah, so Stones only had two games last season where he got subbed on, and one of those was returning from injury. So yeah, I think the stats back that up, but yeah, you know, anything can happen, of course, especially around UCL rotation, especially.
Sure.
Great insight. Great
insights. Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, that's a great point you brought up there.
Thanks for the question, Yogesh. Let's move on to the data part. This is more our niche. This is what we do, look at underlying data and try to identify assets, of course. Wrangler, you want to talk about this and conduct this part? Ask Alex and Yogesh questions.
Sure, we already had most of this discussion already whenever we are talking about the teams, you know, so it's kind of more of a visual, and as you mentioned, kind of our niche is like, you know, to putting the underlying data here. And if you'd like to add more, like Alex or Yogesh here, feel free to chime in. But here is basically you are putting the XGI, so expected goal and expected assist, basically from last year. So it's basically whole season data. So XGI per 90 along x-axis and along y-axis is the BPS per 90 for each of the defenders for from these two teams. So yeah, I mean, as you can see, right, basically Sergio Gomez is, I mean, he started only few games, I mean, around 300 each minute. So although his XGI is pretty high, but probably doesn't count much. But we'll see. I mean, as Alex mentioned, right, that there could be a good combination between him and Foden. Looking forward this season, something to look forward. And he's only 4 million. So we'll see how it goes. But if Vardiel is signed, then again, we don't know. So anyways, see here for the Arsenal, White and Zinchenko is kind of, you know, having the same underlying, as you can see from Arsenal, while Gabriel's and Saliba, in terms of XGI, they are kind of lower than White and Zinchenko, which makes sense because, you know, like as we know already that Zinchenko plays in inverted role and White also have, like, you know, very good attacking threat. Now, one question actually I wanted to ask to you guys, but I think I already got the answer. So first of all, you know, like amongst these four, White, Zinchenko, Gabriel, and Saliba, so I guess White's appeal is already diminished, right, because of the Timbers signing, right? And one thing I would like to mention, Timbers data is not here, but I mean, if I were to put it here, like his XGI last season, it's gonna be 0.17 per 90, which is actually more than everyone except Sergio. So yeah, White is like off the board. He's 5.5. Now, I was actually like, you know, thinking Saliba is kind of under the radar. He was 5 million. His BPS actually was pretty high whenever he played. And you know, like I felt he could be a good pick, but now that Alex actually asked that question, like, you know, whenever you're out of possession, right, and the tactical change that Arteta might have to do in that case, Gabriel might not be in the left back; he might be in the center back. In that case, Saliba might be, you know, in the bench, right? So out of Gabriel and Saliba, it's always Gabriel, Yogesh, or you think Saliba should have some?
No, I really don't rate Saliba. I mean, Saliba, if he's fit, is going to start every single minute for Arsenal this season, be it Champions League, Premier League, whatever it might be, right? All the crucial games he's going to play for Arsenal. Gabriel, I'm just leaning towards Gabriel because of his aerial threat and set pieces. He comes away with those goals, right, when people don't expect, and that's huge for a defender. Then you have like a 15-point, like if he manages to keep the clean sheet, right? So that's the reason why I'm leaning towards Gabriel over Saliba, because I think Gabriel is as nailed on as Saliba, at least at the start of the season, even before we wildcard. And I mean, there are 3 more preseason games to come. you will get a very good idea based on that Community Shield match that we would have against Manchester City, right? That starting lineup, would be a very good indication of how Arteta is gonna start the season with. So, but yeah, in terms of FPL, I think both are good options. I'm slightly leaning towards Gabriel over Saliba. White, like you said, like he's priced at 5.5. I don't see any reason for us to go to him as an option for FPL. Zinchenko, I expect his minutes to go down. Last season, like I said, he was the only solid option for us who can play in that inverted fullback position. So he got a lot of, there was a lot of assurance with his X minutes, but. This season with Timber, right? You can see Arteta opting for Timber and giving Zinchenko rest every now and then. So he's a good value at 5, but then there is not that much assurance like last season for Zinchenko this season. So looking at everything, right? The graph here, Gabriel is a solid option. Saliba is also a good option.
Okay. Yeah. So thanks for the insight. I mean, I think Zinchenko, even actually in the preseason, we saw that Kier or Tomias is starting in the left back, right? So Zinchenko has attacking threat, but again, I don't know how much nailed he will be.
Yeah.
Saliba, it's last season also, he was 4.5, and I mean, we actually, I don't know how many people actually had Saliba. He already had his house, and his price actually went up, and I just felt that I kind of missed out. So I don't know whether this season I kind of felt that Saliba might be again the under pick than Gabriel, but
he's a good pick, Wrangler. He's showing up high on BPS too, right? So you would see those bonus points too from Saliba every now and then. And like I said, I think Arsenal have a better chance of keeping more clean sheets than they did last season. I expect them to improve defensively this season. That's going to be indeed like one of the aim that Arteta is going to chase, right? It's going to be a big target for Arsenal, right? 44 goals considered in a league season is not going to win you titles. So if as a team Arsenal are aspiring to win the title against this Manchester City side, right, you have to cut down the goals. So I expect that to happen too in the season. So both Saliba and Gabriel are great options. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Yogesh. Nice insights. So Alex, we already heard about the defenders already from you. So again, the data as you see here, right, that Stones have higher attacking threat, and now he's playing inverted role. He already scored a goal in the preseason, right? So, but again, in terms of nailedness, Ruben Diaz, you are saying that probably more preferable than Stones, or they are same? And if you have, I mean, if you're asked to pick between these two, Ruben Diaz and Stones, whom are you gonna pick?
Yeah, it'd definitely be Stones. I mean, I think Ruben is ever so slightly more nailed, and when we talk about the entire season, he's definitely more nailed in the long run. But when we're just planning our teams for 1 to 8 game weeks approximately, I think that Stones is the clear pick for the time zone that we're looking at right now. And I do want to go back to the point with the question that Yogesh brought up about him not really subbing on when he's benched. I do think I may have overstated the sort of risk of going for 2 City, assets alongside Holland, because a trio of, let's say, Holland, Stones, and Foden, who would probably be the 3 most popular, maybe Foden really is the only risk there. So I think I might have overstated that if you do pick the right assets. So yeah, Stones, I think another thing worth noting is that he didn't play that role until the second half of the season. So his XGI is probably even higher when he's playing that role than it shows here. And, the only other things that I want to point out on this are, Manu Akanji is quite lower there. And, when you look at a graph like this, it doesn't really give any sort of impetus to go for him over the likes of John Stones or Ruben Diaz. But one thing that goes in Akanji's favor, at least in the long run, and this might not, again, it might not apply to our first initial wildcard teams, but he is someone who sort of bridges that gap between the first choice squad and the second choice squad. And, Ruben Diaz and John Stones had injuries, but a big reason that Manu Akanji had the highest minutes of any City defender last season is because He's in City's best 11, and he's also the player that sort of fills in the gaps when you need to rest either John Stones or Ruben Diaz. So at least long term, that's something to keep an eye out with him is, Stones and Diaz, when they are rotated, will likely be rotated for easier fixtures that you would likely expect City to keep a clean sheet, whereas Manu Akanji might get starts in all sorts of matches. And then the last player that I do want to point out is Sergio Gomez all the way over there on the right. And when we get to my draft in a bit, you'll see that at the moment, I have 4.0 million Sergio Gomez sitting on my bench just because he is a winger or an attacking midfielder classified as a 4.0 million defender in FPL. And at some point during the season, he's going to get a few starts. And when he does start, if you can, maybe it's a leaked lineup or something, whatever it is, if you can ever play him in your FPL lineup with the certainty that he's starting a game, he's going to be one of the most game-breaking assets to ever exist, in all honesty. He probably will only get, 3 to 5 starts over the course of the entire season, but I think that's something to potentially take advantage of. And, locking in that third City spot can also sort of dispel you from taking too many risks with City. Someone who might get a bit over eager and go for a triple up of Haaland, Foden, and Alvarez. If you slap Sergio Gomez onto your bench, it just limits you to only picking 2 City assets, and therefore your risk management is just, chopped down immediately. And then one thing I do want to add on the Arsenal side of things, which is something that I realized when FPL Fraser put up a very similar sort of chart to this with expected goal involvements on one axis the other day. And I think it was FPL Rover commented that, you should probably weight goals as twice as heavy as assists for expected goal involvements, just because they're double the FPL points. And I think here, if you were to double Gabriel's goals, like double his XG and keep XA at a ratio of 1, he would probably go further down the chart than White and Zinchenko, or at least equal with them. So I think that might be, something that, is perhaps, a bit misleading in a way in terms of Gabriel, and just, makes him a stronger asset than this chart even shows.
That's a great point, Alex. Yeah.
That's point we noted. We actually sometimes do XG over XA, which gives us like clear picture. We do have 4 quadrant, which like in the rightmost triangle gives us like basically most valuable picks. But yeah, I think I agree. That's something definitely to consider for the future. And I also like your Akanji shout. I remember in last season, in the later half of the season, in your threads, you've been talking about Akanji a lot, and I wish I would have heard. I actually was very confused about Akanji and Stones, and I went with the Stones because of the higher upside. And I mean, I don't regret, but again, I think Akanji is a very good pick, in the long run, because he has the capability, as you said, right, to kind of give a feeler between the first and the second choice team. So that's really cool.
Yeah. I think I made that shout, and it came true in terms of minutes, but City just didn't keep clean sheets, so it didn't matter in the end.
Okay, yeah, that is all from my end, unless Alex or Yogesh have anything to add here.
So just maybe before we move on, so if you had to pick one defender, Yogesh, that would be Gabriel?
Yeah.
From Arsenal. And Alex, that would be Stones?
Correct.
Okay, all right. Great discussion. All right, let's move on to the attackers, more fancy names. ZD, you want to conduct this part? I'll just explain what the plot is. On the x-axis is the x attacking point potential, essentially based on xg and xa numbers in terms of FPL points, what they could score in terms of underlying numbers. And then on the y-axis is the same as we saw on the other plot, the BPS per 90 minutes. So it's essentially showing an overall attacking potential in terms of underlying numbers and also bonus potential. So ZD, please take us through this and ask Alex and Yogesh questions that you intend to.
Yeah, thank you, Kante. So I think this is the most people wants this asset. They are the game breaker. So if you see from the graph, Haaland is like in another level. So I think there is we don't need to discuss about it. His stat is good. I mean, he's already in 85% team, right? So there is no point of talking. And Gabriel Jesus, his XI is very good. Like if you see, it's like almost 3 with NKT, and for BPS he's not that good. And as El De Bruyne is BPS monster, and yeah, Saka is like quite behind, and Martinelli is um, good in that case. I mean, what do you think, Yogesh? So, like, say if you want to take one Arsenal attacker, is it Saka or Martinelli?
Between the two,
Yeah.
really,
Yep.
um, I would still go for Saka because he has penalties, and you know there could be a slight tweak in the way Arsenal attack. I mean, Saka was typically playing out wide this last season, right? I mean, with the way Arsenal are gonna play with the introduction of Rice, Timber, Havertz, and all those guys, right? New guys coming in. I won't be surprised if Saka comes in a little bit. He outperforms his XG too, right? And he's also on penalties, and probably slightly more safer than Martinelli on X minutes. So yeah, it's very close between the two. I would hate to pick between the two, to be honest. Like when I would rather go for both of them. But yeah, if I have to choose one, I'll go for Saka.
Okay, and what about Jesus and Martinelli? It seems like there is a, I mean, his X at a, probably of attacking is very good, but like seems like he's always underperform, right? So, do you think Jesus, or what about his X minute, right? With Havertz or Nketiah, do you back Jesus or Martinelli?
I think Jesus starts all the games, right? I mean, I don't see him not starting ahead of NKT or Trossard or anybody else. If Jesus is fit, is going to start. I think last season he had his injury. He was out for 4 or 5 months, and that kind of impacted the way he came back after the injury. Was not up to the mark. The thing about Jesus is like, I mean, he's not a great finisher. Everybody knows like he's a average finisher, but then he gets into those places, right, and he puts himself into those positions to score more than the other players, right, and those stats don't lie, right? The XGI stats for Jesus, right, he's always right up there, and against weaker oppositions he can easily score a brace, right? And when you know that he's playing for a top two attack, he's playing for a team who has scored 88 goals last season, right? Only City have scored more than Arsenal last season. So, I mean, and he's priced at 8.5. I mean, what is there to not like about him? At least initially at the start of the season, when you have those, long fixtures, to take advantage of, right? So, yeah, I would definitely go for Jesus. He also offers that, in from FPL perspective, that a placeholder forward. If you think something doesn't go as per expectations, you can easily switch to the forwards from other teams. Like you have Nkunku, you have even Callum Wilson, who was on fire at the later part of the last season. So he offers a lot of flexibility from those aspects too. So I would definitely start Jesus at the start of the season.
Yeah, I think the should be like if you pick one Arsenal defender, say it's Gabriel, which two attackers? So most people probably obviously going with Saka. So the choice between Martinelli and Jesus. So although like there are lots of options in the mid in 8 million bracket, but I think the issue is with the and also Jesus makes Martinelli a better asset.
Right. Yeah, if I have to go for two options, right? Let's say
Like
I have Gabriel in my team, then I would go with Jesus and Saka, or Jesus and Martinelli. I'm fine, but I would have Jesus with
mm,
Gabriel, and then go with either Saka or Martinelli. Yeah, Martinelli is a guy, like, I mean, you remember last season, like around game week 26, he exploded, like he scored some
yeah,
20 points or whatever. Like, yeah, I mean, people wouldn't have, right? They really suffered. He's that kind of a guy. He's a sharp shooter. He's a very good finisher. He's gonna get into those positions and bury those chances. And yeah, so I feel like Martinelli plays a little more to the inside or more than Saka. Saka often stays wide, and many a times I've seen like opposition teams, double marking Saka. There are two players on him all the time, so that really doesn't free him up that much. But on the other side, Martinelli, he capitalizes on those open spaces and gets into the box more often than Saka. So I really don't hate the option where you can go in for Jesus, Martinelli, and Gabriel, and Saka is the preferred option, but you can play FPL many ways, and these three are really solid options. I don't see going with these three would put you back versus including Saka.
Any thoughts on Odegaard? And also another question that I had regarding Martinelli is, at least back end of the season, we kind of saw him getting subbed out at around like 60, 65 minutes for Trossard and so on. So first two questions. So one question is, any X-minute concern with Martinelli? And is Odegaard a non-option this year, at least to start with in game?
Yeah, Martinelli, I'm not concerned about X minutes at the start of the season, to be honest. You have also seen some fair indications on where Arteta wants to deploy Trossard in long term, right? He's looking to probably bring him in onto that left 8 creative role as an option. I mean, if you look at the explosiveness, the left winger, he's a standout number one option for us in the squad. The other options are Reece Nelson, who I expect to have a very good season at Arsenal again. But I mean, in terms of challenging him for the starting role in this team, right? I think Martinelli is clear, and yeah, he's a solid option. I won't worry about his 6 minutes at the start. Maybe down the line, you never know, right? With injuries and others, the Champions League coming into picture, yeah, you might have to keep an eye on it. But for the first few game weeks, he's a solid asset to own. And sorry, Kandi, what was your second question?
Odegaard is do you think he's a non-option with all the other players in the same price bracket?
Well, it's crazy. I mean, it's this guy scored over 200 points last season. Yeah, and he's like valued at 8.5, but people are still not considering him, mainly because of the other assets you have at Arsenal, right? With a lot of upside. Odegaard is someone you can, you see those posts on Twitter, right? People set up the team game week 1, forget about it, and they still end up scoring good total points. I think he would be the number one player in the team. If you want to set and forget option, just put him in the team and forget about it. Because the problem with Odegaard is you can't predict, when he's gonna haul. Like he would have like a series of 3 to 5 points, and then bang bang 16, and then he's up on averages against the others, right? So if you miss out on those games, and if you don't have Odegaard, then you're kind of suffering, right? With the likes of Saka, Jesus, they give you those constant 8 points, 9 pointers, right? So you keep along. I think that's how I would see that as an option. So I don't rate again Odegaard as an option, but when you have likes of Saka, Martinelli, Jesus in the same team, and then you have other great options from other sides, it probably goes down the rankings there.
Yep, great insight. Ziddy,
last year, just one point. Last year, Odegaard actually revived my rank. I started from like wildcard, second wild card. I started with him, and he gave me lots of points because he was not in many teams. I did not have the Martinelli. I had Odegaard. So I mean, I'm grateful to him, but I also
you have a little bit of soft spot for Odegaard.
But I don't see him picking like from the beginning because of his price point, and also how we need to see, like, right, if he can make those run yet, because now I think Havertz might make those runs, right? What do you think about Havertz's impact?
Yeah, it's like if I have to compare these two, right, creative eights, Odegaard is more on the ball player, Havertz is more off the ball player. Havertz is someone would make those late runs into the box, and he's also tall, and then you can get some attacking headers too. So yeah, but considering everything, I mean, this is where kind of like we kind of overthink, but I won't be surprised like Odegaard scores another 200-pointer season, because he's playing for a side who's primarily going to attack all the games, especially those home games. Arsenal are a good bet wherein they can score 3-4 goals. So he's going to take along. He's kind of the central linchpin for the Arsenal attack. So yeah, it's going to be another strong season for Odegaard, but then you can have only 3 players from Arsenal. So who do you go for? Right? That's the question.
Yeah. All right. Did you want to talk about Man City?
Yeah. So for Man City, I think this, like at least beginning of the season, De Bruyne is not the option probably. So I think Alex already talked, spent much time on Foden. So do you want to go a little bit details about Foden, Alex, or you want to talk about probably another option like Julian Alvarez?
Yeah, I mean, with Foden, the sort of thing to know with him is that, we're losing Gundogan and we're losing Riyad Mahrez. And City needs someone to step up to fill those voids. Even if City sign a right winger as experienced as Rafinha or bringing Leroy Sané back, I don't think they're going to be able to replace the approximately 2,000 minutes that Mahrez put in last season in the league. So even if City find that adequate replacement at right wing, Foden will still need to, take on a bit more load there, you would think. And at the left attacking mid spot, from what we've seen in terms of, Pep's comments and Foden's comments throughout his entire City career about him being a natural attacking midfielder, with him playing in that role in both games in preseason so far, it's also hard to think that he's not going to take on, a significant amount of minutes in that role. And on the left wing, the dynamic between him and Grealish is pretty much unchanged. City at the moment, unless we sign a winger who's capable of playing on both wings, we do not have a secondary option to Grealish on the left. So, Foden will still need to deputize off the left. He's going to be playing in attacking midfield whenever he can, ideally. He's going to be needing to play off the right a bit at times. And that altogether just, should lead to a sort of uptick in minutes overall for Foden this season. And, you look at this chart and we know how good he is in terms of sheer output per 90. If you look at the sort of per 90 statistics last season in terms of raw output, which is goals plus assists minus penalties, Foden was the 5th highest player in the Premier League last season. So if you apply that to a larger sample of minutes, there's no reason he shouldn't be pushing on into that 175 point, 200 point range, which is where you want him to be if you're buying him. And, you look at Riyad Mahrez here, and, he's very high up on this list. He produced exceptional output. City need to fulfill that role in some way. So whoever we bring in off the right needs to be a goal scorer and assister in some way. They can't just be, I look at Elise, and Elise doesn't really have the goal scoring aspect to his game. He just has the assists right now. So that's part of the reason I'm skeptical on him. And, whoever comes in place of Mahrez is also someone to look at as an option. And, what you mentioned there with De Bruyne, he's not going to be available for at least a few game weeks in the beginning of the season. Even then, he's, I think, too expensive to justify us going for him, just because the minutes are not secure completely, even when he is fit. And there are just so many cheaper assets that will produce likely at the same rate that he does. And then, Julian Alvarez is a curious one here because, his stats are really good relatively. Like, we look at a player like Saka, who's pretty much at everyone's team, and Alvarez is a higher output per 90 than him. But obviously the question and concern is minutes. And I just don't understand how you can sort of manage putting Alvarez into an FPL squad to start the season, because first of all, you're going to be playing a sort of guessing game as to whether he's starting or not. Some weeks you'll get a leak and you'll know that he's starting or he's benched, and it makes your decision very easy. Other weeks, City will have an amazing fixture and you won't have a clue if he's starting or not, and you'll have a very tough decision as to whether to start him and risk a 20 or 30-minute cameo, or to bench him and risk him starting and playing 60 or 70 minutes. So it's just a sort of headache that I don't really think is worth dealing with at the beginning of the season with Alvarez. Until and hopefully he doesn't, but until Haaland gets an injury, I just am, very, very tentative on going for Alvarez as an FPL asset, as good as his output is when he does play.
Yep. Good thinking. Yeah, good analysis. Julian Alvarez, yeah, I mean, last year he got some minute, but this year probably you'd expect, but I mean, it's all paper out. It's very difficult to guess. Yeah, I think you will answered. Anything to add, Yogesh, Wrangler, Kante?
Yeah, I mean, Grealish, you already kind of touched, Alex, before. He's probably the most like secured out of all the midfielders, minutes wise, but he's just not explosive, right? Especially, I mean, back end of last season, we were picking him because there were multiple double game weeks, etc., etc. But start of the season, you kind of want to catch those like big hauls and so on, right? Grealish is just not that player, right? So, do you think he is an option at all, or at least when we are starting the season, or kind of a non-option?
I don't think so. He's a bit too boring for me, I guess.
Mm-hmm,
I think, he's a steady ticker where if you put him in your squad and just leave him there for the entire season, he'll probably be, a good asset that you can just work around, but
yeah.
He's not someone that you're targeting these explosive fixtures for. He's just someone who's going to tick, and there's also just nothing to prove that his output is going to, take a huge leap this year. If it does, then he's going to be an excellent sort of under the radar pick. But I don't know. I don't see that happening personally. And I think their name's Connor. Posted in the chat. He's asking about Elise is a good fit for control, and he is, but he asked, do City really need goals from that new player? And my answer is yes. City really do need goals from whichever right winger comes in. It's a quality that Riyad Mahrez has offered abundantly throughout his career, who is very much a sort of one-to-one producer. Like his goals and assist output were pretty much even throughout his entire City career. He became a bit more of a creator last season, but still, City need goal threats because Haaland cannot carry the load on his own. We know that Grealish isn't really that strong of a goal threat. We're losing Gundogan, who has been a very strong goal threat at times. Foden is pretty much the secondary goal threat for City, or Alvarez if he's playing off of Haaland. But, we really do need other places for the goals to come from. And one final point on Foden that is I forgot to mention is with Mahrez leaving, he is going to be taking a lot more set pieces. And first of all, that's going to boost his output ever so slightly. That's a good positive. A second positive is it's going to push him up in the bonus here to the level of De Bruyne, and maybe even further on than De Bruyne. When any player that has a large amount of set pieces, their bonus is automatically just raised to a level that is hard for other players to match. And I think that's going to be a very big sort of factor in Foden's case as an FPL asset as well.
Very good point. Yeah, I was not as big on Foden this season, but I think you were tempting me to think
I
about
wasn't
it a little
either.
more.
I wasn't either. At the
But
beginning of the season, I was completely set on not going with him because I thought that there were so many better assets. And now I've undergone all this research, and I've convinced myself into the guy.
Good
Yeah,
research, good research.
you have talked all of us to get Foden, Alex. And it was fascinating to hear you. Like Foden seems to be the Akanji of attack. Like in terms of he's gonna be filling up players like Grealish if he's not available. He can play across all the attacking positions: left eight, right eight, even right wing. And looking at the other options that are available. I mean, everybody is again gonna walk into the Foden trap. Hopefully, it works. So that's it.
Yeah. Wrangler, you had a question?
No, I mean basically, the Foden hype. I mean, it all makes sense, and whatever Alex says, like in terms of his X minutes, like Mahrez and Gundogan left, so definitely I can see the Foden hype. And now actually I'm also getting tempted to take him.
100% effective ownership by tomorrow.
No, I mean basically I think Community Shield is gonna tell us a lot of it's gonna give us a lot of information. But I think I can see the problem with Foden is that I mean I actually mentioned in one of my threads as well that he always had a phase in a season, like in each season, right? And some people can catch it up, some people cannot, right? I mean, last season even, like, I went with De Bruyne, right? Because like, I didn't take Salah, while other people got Salah and Foden, and they got lots of all. And whenever I come to the Foden, and then like, he became like a naughty guy. So you just cannot predict. So, but in terms of Julian Alvarez, I feel like last season again, whenever De Bruyne was not there, Julian Alvarez actually was a very much like good deputy for him, and even last 8 or 9 game weeks, he started a lot. He had like better X minutes than Foden, so that kind of like a little bit makes me worried that, I mean, I don't know if Foden is really. I mean, definitely it makes sense because Gundogan and Mari is not there, but is Foden really nailed as we are thinking? So something to see. I'm not sure. Who knows? Alvarez might be the option, and I like Alvarez, or Alvarez might be popular in the Salah draft, because whenever you get Salah, you will need some enabler, right? Like players like Enciso or even Calvert Lewin, and Julian Alvarez is one of them as well. And if he becomes an option, then Salah draft will be very popular. So that's just my take on that. So.
That's fair. At the same time, I would say that if you have Alvarez in your squad, knowing that he's not going to play some games, you also need to invest in bench cover there. And so he might not be as much of an enabler as it is, because you still need to add a few more funds for the bench. And something to point out with Foden, that it's extremely true. Foden is one of the most frustrating owns in FPL. And he's certainly not going to be nailed in terms of starting every game. I'm not delusional in that sense. I don't think anyone should be.
Yeah.
I think the thing with Foden is that you just have to maintain that temperament with him, knowing that those frustrations are going to come. And you literally just have to invest in an idea that over the course of whatever period of time you're approaching, whether you say, I'm just going to put Foden in game week 1, I'm going to hold him until game week 38 because Alex thinks he's going to play 2,500 minutes this season or whatever. If you just hold him, then you can just sort of put aside those sort of worries, because you're going to get the good weeks with the bad. If you do try to play the Foden sort of cards though and try to test your luck, I don't think most times. I think we've all probably had an experience where it just doesn't work out well. So when you're approaching, like for us, if I am to go with Foden or in my initial team, there's no chance that I'm transferring him out at any point before I wildcard, because we know that's just a recipe for disaster. I think you just invest in his potential if you believe in it, and you hold him until you have a wild card or a period where you don't need to spend a free transfer on him to get him out.
Yeah.
Very good
points. Good points. All right. Last question before we move on, Yogesh. First 3 preferred Arsenal attackers. Rank 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I'm going to surprise a few folks here. For me, number 1 is Gabriel Jesus. Number 2, Martinelli. Number 3, Saka. I mean, I'm just looking at the first 7 game weeks. I'm not looking at the entirety of the season and things like that. Things would change as we approach Champions League and other games. But if I have to start 3 players, right? And you said only attackers, right, Howie?
Yeah.
So Jesus, Martinelli, and Saka.
Okay. Alex, same question for you. 2 Man City attackers outside Haaland, 1 and 2.
Foden and no one. I mean,
yeah.
I just don't think that I don't see the case for Alvarez at the time being. He would be the third man, but I simply do not understand the reason to go with him until Haaland gets injured, because
makes sense.
You're really just testing your luck. If you start him in all the games that he starts, then great, he's an amazing pick. But the ability to start him in every single one of the games he starts and bench him in every single game that he's benched is a talent that no one in the world has. You're literally just playing the lottery, and I don't think that's worth it to start the season.
Yeah. Yep. No, absolutely makes sense. All right, so let's move on. So we have one more slide. I think, Yogesh, we have covered this. I don't think we need to spend time on this anymore.
Right. Yeah.
So just one more slide that Wrangler put together, more to show the X minutes. I think in some way we have already spoken about this. Anything specific, Wrangler, that you wanted to touch on That's something we haven't spoken about
No,
already.
I mean, basically, like, again, along x-axis is just minutes per appearance, right? And if you see the Arsenal boys, like, their depth of the squad was not there in the last season, and that's why you see like Martinelli, Odegaard, Jesus, Saka, Saliba, Gabriel, right? Zinchenko. It's in the right hand side, like, more than 80 or approximately 80 minutes.
Yeah, they were basically starting every game, pretty much.
Exactly. Except, like, if you, like, consider like last 8 or 10 game weeks, in that time Martinelli's like minutes actually decreased to like 66 ish, because that's when Trossard started coming. And that's why, actually, I mean, I'm not sure about Martinelli, to be honest. I mean, definitely he's going to start, no doubt about it. He's going to start all of the games, probably, right? First 7 or 8 games until the Champions League comes. Now, my worry is that he's going to probably leave around at 65 or 70 minutes, because that's what we see. And Trossard is going to come. Now, I don't like, I don't like it, to be honest. Like, I don't like my player to go out, yeah, around 60 minutes or 65 minutes. I mean, unless he gives return. So, to me, it's Saka first for Arsenal, and then Jesus, and then I actually prefer Odegaard over Martinelli, to be honest, for the experience. That's my preference, but I don't know if you guys want to add anything
Yeah, I mean,
here.
it's of course depends on how you are as an FPL manager as well, right? How you want to manage your team. You don't want to take too many risks. You of course want to go for the explosive guys that Yogesh was talking about, right? Kind of explosiveness, especially targeting those fixtures. But at the same time, you want to look at like when you would wildcard. Say, for example, if you want to wildcard, say in game week 15, 16, or as late as possible, right? You don't want to play an early wildcard in game week 8 and 9. Maybe Odegaard is the better option, right? So there are a lot of different ways to play the game. And I don't think, as Yogesh mentioned, it could be another 200-point season for Odegaard again, right? So who knows? So there is not a lot of chance that it can go wrong, right? Of course, it can. If you are looking at a given 3-4 game weeks, it can have a lot of variance. But if you're thinking about long term, I think there is not much to go wrong with this Arsenal guys specifically. But yeah, good point, Wrangler. There. Anything else that anyone wants to add before we move on to the drafts?
I want to actually ask two questions
Go ahead.
one to Yogesh and another to Alex. First question, I think Abdullah also already put that. So, say Saka and Jesus are the first two choices. Now, the third option, do you want to go with Gabriel or Mart? I think your third option was Saka, right? So, I don't know. So, tell me about your best three options for the from the Arsenal side.
Oh, for the first few game weeks, Wrangler.
I mean, basically, yeah, first say 4 to 5 game weeks.
Yeah, I mean, you will see it in my draft right now. I'm in 3 Arsenal attackers. I'm going for Jesus, Saka, and Martinelli. I just think those home games are so good, and I am fairly certain that these three guys will start all those games. At least the first 3-4 game weeks, right? So that's gonna give you the head start that you need probably, and to how Kante explained, right? It's also the way you play the FPL game, right? It's your nature as an FPL manager, whether you go for conservative picks or an attacking picks. I always lean for going for an option with more upside. So that's where I am at right now. And like I said, I really don't hate the other options. Like, I mean, two attackers and Gabriel is perfectly fine. That option might even outscore the three attackers option.
Mm-hmm.
And also getting an Odegaard for someone like Martinelli because of the fair concerns that you highlighted, Wrangler, right? Martinelli might come out after 60, 65 minutes. That can happen, right? So you can, go for an option like Odegaard in those cases, right? So, yeah, I mean, but you are looking at those 5 players for Arsenal, and you're essentially picking 3 out of those 5, right? I mean, I really don't see a reason for us to look beyond those 5-6 options at the start of the season. And then it depends on the other factors. Like if you go with two attackers, that probably gives you options to get in players like Madison, Bruno Fernandes, Rashford, and all those guys from other teams, right, who are also very explosive, who also have a good set of fixtures at the start of the season, even like Foden, right, based on what we discussed so far. So yeah, it really depends on how you want to line up your team initially, but yeah, primarily you're looking out those 5-6 options to start the season with. But definitely triple Arsenal. I don't see any reason why you won't go for a triple Arsenal. I can say that.
Okay. And quickly to Alex, as a second option from Man City, Foden or Stones?
I don't really
FPL.
have a preference out of those two, to be honest. I think that more depends. I think they're pretty much equally good picks in their own right, in my opinion, for the first 7 or 8 game weeks. I think, I don't know. I think it's comes down to sort of the play style that any person sort of approaches the game with. If you're more of the sort of high upside, explosive upside chaser, then you go for Foden. If you're someone who wants to go with a player who's a bit more steady and a bit more reliable, then you go with Stones. But I think they're both sort of on the same tier relative to defense and midfield that I really can't pick between them.
Okay. Yep. Thanks.
Fair. All right, so let's move on to our last segment of the video. Very good discussion, by the way. Thanks for all that, both Alex and Yogesh. So, of course, this is still kind of an early draft. We have another couple of weeks to go before August 11th. It's a Friday deadline, by the way, right? It's kind of unusual.
City early lineup too.
And
so.
City early lineup too. So there's going to be interesting servers failing and so on. But we'll see. But walk us through your current draft, Alex.
Yeah, so I pretty much have made one draft for all of preseason, and I've only changed like 1 or 2 players. Like Joao Pedro has been flipped around between him and someone like Enciso a bit, but pretty much for me, obviously Haaland's a no-brainer, and I am finding it, which I'm interested to hear all of your opinions on this. I'm finding it incredibly difficult to go without Mohamed Salah to start the season because the way that I approach FPL, I think it makes more sense to someone has used the sort of analogy before of filling up a pot with stones, and you always want to start with the biggest stones first and then work your way down to the smaller stones and then the sand. So pretty much in FPL, you want to start with the most important players, and with Mohamed Salah, you just know what you're getting. You know that you're getting an absolutely elite FPL asset. And if we look at the past 2, 3, 4 FPL seasons, at the end of the season, when you look at the sort of optimized lineup for the entire season, it is almost always about fitting in all the premiums and then finding the best value assets alongside them. And, I think a lot of people get sort of drunk on the optimism that these mid-priced assets such as Rashford, Saka, Martinelli, Madison, Foden, Heung-min Son, that all these players are going to have the best season of their career and put up a 175 point to 200 point plus season. And in preseason, it's so easy to buy into those narratives that those players are going to be exceptional, when in reality, less than half of them will probably perform to that level. And so for me, I just want to start with the sort of known quantity. And you look at across that midfield, and it's sort of the same thing. I look at all 4 of these guys, Salah, Rashford, Saka, and Martinelli, and Yogesh may have convinced me to, play around with fitting Jesus in here instead of them. But any of those guys, they're just so consistent. Their role within the team is really consistent. Their minutes are really consistent. They're just pretty much going to be the best FPL assets throughout the entire season. And we kind of already know that. And then, so I just sort of started with them. Those are, aside from Jesus maybe coming in for either Saka or Martinelli, those 5 guys are pretty much set in stone for me. And then alongside that, Nkunku, I have some faith in him. I think the main thing for him is that I want a Chelsea forward for that game week 3 to 5 run.
Yep.
And I find it incredibly difficult to start with anyone else and move to them, because you don't want to start with Jesus and move him out after 2 game weeks. And you look at the other forward, there just isn't a great option to punt with. So I'd rather punt on Nkunku for those 2 game weeks and then either keep him or even downgrade to Nico Jackson if he looks to be the better asset. So that's the thinking there. And then Joao Pedro is more of a preseason reaction, of course. That can be any type of player who, they're sort of the least important out of my attackers. But I do sort of back him from what I've seen and what I've heard from Brighton supporters that he's going to make that number 10 role his own this season. And I think it's worth taking a risk there when it's the least pricey attacker of your team. And then all that just leads to me going sort of super cheap in defense. I was looking at Sir Tulp's optimized lineup for last season of the ideal set and forget team, and something that stood out to me is there like Ben Mee was included in that draft. And so it's just, I'm approaching this in a bit more of a meta perspective of I want to play a bit more of a steady game this season and keep my sort of core sort of structure intact. And as much as I like the looks of Trent, Trippier, John Stones, I might try to squeeze John Stones in here. I just don't really, see the case for putting that much money in defense when I look across the landscape at people who have drafts with, Estupinian, Shaw, Trippier. I just think that I can sort of match that potential with a few cheaper assets.
Yeah, great way of thinking, and I think it's really unique in comparison to all the other drafts that are floating around in Twitter. And as you said, I mean, Salah is kind of that's the, what can I say, kind of the community breaker, right? So it's one side of the thought is that it's just too much money to justify, at least to start with him, especially given that maybe we won't captain him a lot, right? So that's essentially the biggest argument against having a second premium, given that Haaland will be kind of the perma captain. Maybe not always, but at least when we are talking about the start of the season. He's always going to be like 150, 160, 170% EO, right, every week, Haaland. So that's the counter argument, the only counter argument I would say against Salah. But as you mentioned, he's just the proven asset, still on penalties for Liverpool, and we expect Liverpool to do a lot better than last season. And apparently, Poole was bad last season, right? Salah was bad last season. He still had like a 230, 240 point season, right? So that's the kind of player he is. So it's hard to argue against that either, right? So it absolutely makes sense the way you explained. And I think sometimes people put too much emphasis on that, like 11th player of your team. I have spoken about that before as well. If you have a good core, that 11th player doesn't matter as much. Sometimes people think I need to have like 11 very good players. No, not always, right? That 11th player can rotate. And there is always like those cheap players kind of that arises every season, right? That in or around that 4.5 to 5.56 million range. So yeah, I think it's a perfectly good draft. I don't have anything to say against this. And any other comments, guys?
No, absolutely. I mean, I like the way you're thinking here, Alex. And with Liverpool, right? I mean, they have made some crucial signings in the midfield. I mean, look at the number of goals Liverpool scored last season versus the seasons when they were in their prime. I expect Liverpool reverting back to their prime with some of the signings that they have made. Soboslai and McAllister, you would see the ball moving to the front much more quicker, so then, the obvious threat there is Mohamed Salah waiting to pounce on all those opportunities, right? He's a clinical finisher too. He's on penalties. I mean, it's a perfectly viable strategy. The only thing is, like, I mean, if if there are any other attackers from Liverpool, I mean, there are a couple of preseason games, and if you get some indications, like, let's say Darwin Núñez is kind of a solid start at the for the first 2 game weeks, right? Then that's what I would show in my draft. I've started with Núñez for the first 2 game weeks. I have somebody against Bournemouth home for the second game week, and then then I can easily move to someone like Nkunku from game week 3 onwards, right? So I'm not compromising on Jesus with the formation that I went for 3-4-3. Jesus is going to be there until my first wild card. Haaland is there. Then Darwin can move out to become Nkunku. And if I'm not convinced there, I can easily pivot to someone like Madison in the central midfield. If I like how Tottenham are playing with their attacking players this season, so that my draft gives that flexibility. But over to Salah, right? I mean, it's a great option, no doubts, and he's going to be a massive differential, especially in game week 2, right? Imagine all the people are thinking about who to captain. Then you are nice and relaxed. You put the captaincy on Salah, for another 9-0 against Bournemouth, but this time more return from Salah. Last season, it was 9-0 with Salah, no attacking returns. I mean, who would have called that? So, yeah, I mean, things could really fall in your place. You could have a good head start. And then the way I'm thinking about Salah is like, other than Bournemouth home, do they have like really good fixtures until we wildcard in game week 8? I might get him on after I see a little bit of how Liverpool play with all the midfielders and the new team with Trent coming in central midfield, and then move to someone like Salah with my first wild card. But it's a great alternative to start with him, obviously.
Yeah, I think Pool have like okay-ish fixtures. They have Villa, Wolves, West Ham in game week 4, 5, 6. Wolves away also. So yeah, not the greatest set of fixtures. Their fixtures really turn well after game week 9 or so. So
Yeah, that's what I was looking at. Like, I mean, game week 8 probably, right? When you wild card, you start getting in those Mohamed Salahs or even Trent Arnold in your team. I'm not worried about them for the first 8 game weeks, except for game week 2, where they could cause big damage, and therefore, someone like Darwin could offset that a little bit, and that's my thinking behind having him in my draft. Yeah. So
And for me on that point, sorry to interrupt, but for me on that point, that sort of is an argument, in my opinion, against Trent and not really against Salah, because I back Salah in any fixture. I think his track record proves that. Whereas the Liverpool defense is a whole nother question when you consider the fixtures.
That's a good point. And I think the point also that Kante made right earlier, right, in terms of captaining Salah, are we really gonna captain him other than game week 2, right? I think that's a big factor too. But yeah, it could work really well, especially if you are not compromising in the other areas of your team. So yeah.
I was looking. I spoke about this on Twitter as well. I mean, all the different drafts that I have looked at, the way FPL has priced players this year, even if you have 2 premiums, even if you have Trent with them, you can still field a very decent 11, right? A lot of good 4.5 defenders, a lot of good like 6 million-ish midfielders and so on. Maybe not as much forwards, but there are lots of kind of cheap enablers in or around that you can fill in to bridge those gaps, and you can still have a good drafter. So there are many ways to build a good game week 1 draft this year, right? So that's the exciting thing, I think, this year. I kind of like that. Initially, I was not liking the pricing as much because I thought that a lot of the players are kind of underpriced. But overall, the pricing has played in a way that you can really have many different teams and still be good, right? So FPL wise, so that's the good part. But yeah, any specific thoughts on the defense, Yogesh? You have Chilwell, Estu, and Shaw. So of course, you're kind of going for the wing backs, a little bit of the upside as well. What's your thought process in there?
Yeah, so I'm pretty much set on 4.5 million keeper right now. I have Pickford, but then I might, once I get assurance that Flecken is going to start for Brentford, I might pivot to him. In terms of defense, it kind of picks itself like Estupinan and Shaw. I really like Shaw as an option. I also like what I saw of Manchester United against our team in that preseason game. I think they are a good bet for clean sheets, especially in those easy home games. Shaw typically even comes out with an assist or bonus point. So I like to start with him initially. And then, I have someone like Henry in the bench. So in a tough fixture like Spurs away, I might get in a 4.5 million defender guy playing instead of Shaw. So, and Chilwell, I don't want to make too many transfers to bring in Chelsea assets starting game week 3. I think their fixtures are awesome starting game week 3, and I really want 2 Chelsea assets starting game week 3, and therefore I already got one at the game before the start of the season. And the idea is to get the second one after reassessing after 2 game weeks, someone like Nkunku or or even I don't know about Chelsea midfielders at this point, but even Jackson could be an option. As a striker, 7 million striker. So that's the thought process there, having Chilwell right at the start of the season, and Estupinan picks himself, and then I will probably pivot him in game week 3 onwards. I think Brighton fixtures are good for the first 2 game weeks. I might go double Chelsea defense too. Someone like Caldwell and Chilwell looks to be a good bet too. So those are some of the options from the defense that I'm thinking about right now. For the midfielders, go ahead, Alex.
I was just going to say, you and I are sort of approaching the Chelsea assets the same way, just from opposite sides. You're starting with a defender, I'm starting with a forward, and I think both of us want to get to two or more Chelsea assets by game week 3.
Right, I think Chelsea are kind of a dark horse this season. They are going to play once every game week. Pochettino is going to set them. I mean, for the first time in probably a couple of years, they're going to have a proper system, and I kind of can draw parallels with how Arsenal assets were priced last season. I think there are going to be a lot of gems that would be unearthed from Chelsea this season. So I just want to get ahead of the game a little bit, having one Chelsea asset right at the start. And game week 3 onwards, I think their fixtures are really good to capitalize on them. So I don't want to take too many hits, right? So that's the thinking behind that.
Yep. No, yeah, looks great, Yogesh. I think, as I said before, also it's hard to make a bad draft this year for game week 1. And I mean, Darwin is probably a little iffy, but already you have seen in the preseason when he is in form what he can do, and especially Liverpool in rhythm, he can be one of those assets that people will be trying to get in their team in a few weeks. Who knows?
Absolutely.
But yeah, looks great on paper.
Yeah, and the price point, right? That's what I'm looking at, like 7.5 million. It's easy to give it away from Darwin. I can either go to someone like Madison in midfield and play 3-5-2, or stick with Nkunku 3-4-3 and move Chilwell out and get somebody like Stones, right? More of like how Alex is starting his team, right? One Chelsea asset to start the season, and then bring in the other guy at game week 3 is what I'm looking at.
Yep, makes sense. All right, guys, we are at the end of our video. Great discussion. Again, a lot of thanks, Alex and Yogesh, for coming here today, spending the time with us. We're almost at 2 hours, but it didn't feel like 2 hours. It was really engaging discussion, and I think very fruitful discussion. At least you guys convinced me on a couple of assets, at least I would say, to consider. So that's the thing that I was trying to take out of this, right? At least individually. Any last comments or in general discussions, Yogesh or Alex?
No, it was an amazing discussion. Like, I mean, to your point, Kante, it's been 2 hours, but it was so much fun, and it was great listening to the views from Alex in general from Manchester City and even from FPL perspective. So yeah, good luck to everyone this season, and I hope you Rada boys smash it again. I think you guys are safe bets to finish in top 10K again. So I mean, how awesome that would be, back-to-back top 10K for all 3. Really looking forward to the season, and good luck to everyone.
Thank you, Yogesh.
Yeah, same here. Thank you guys so much for having me on. It was great to talk. I mean, this discussion was amazing. It really flew by. It did. It was great listening to Yogesh talk about Arsenal. I learned a lot, and you convinced me to probably go with Jesus to start the season. So we'll see if that ends up happening. But yeah, again, wish you guys all the best this season. Hopefully following in your footsteps in terms of rank, because I think if you added your guys' ranks together last season, my rank is probably about 10 times worse than all 3 combined. So
we'll do better. We'll all together do better this season.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So,
all right.
Thank you
guys. Thanks so much for joining. Hopefully we'll meet soon again. Thank you, ZD and Wrangler too, for being here today. All right. See you guys soon. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.